Hello!
Hello!
Welcome to the Deerfield Public Library Twitch channel. I'm Anne.
I'm Christina.
And today we are continuing our journey through the tale of Genji. So we were just discussing what we remembered from last week, which is basically that Genji finally found a girl he doesn't like. He likes most women, but sometimes...
You didn't like this one.
She had a really big nose. And that was
right.
like the
it was
main
red.
thing. And it was a red nose, yeah.
And she didn't know how to write poetry.
Yeah, that's true. She was like super awkward and super like introverted, and she didn't want to speak, and like the only reason he got anything from her was like her lady in waiting was like, I can't handle
The awkward
I
silence.
can't handle the awkward silence, so I'm just gonna jump in. And we decided that was me, if I remember correctly.
Yes, yeah.
I'm just gonna be here. I'm just gonna say some stuff. Okay, this is great. Bye. And then he went back and reflected on how great that girl he kidnapped is.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The child that he's raising.
That's right.
And that's not gonna get awkward at all.
Of course
later
not.
on. What are we talking about? Anyways, chapter 7.
Beneath the autumn leaves. Ga means a celebration, a jubilee for a great personage on the occasion of his attaining a felicitously advanced age.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. My grandpa's gonna get a ga soon.
I love it. The personage here is a former emperor, the father or perhaps the elder brother of Genji's father. The occasion is probably his entering his 40th or 50th year, and the celebration takes place under bright autumn leaves.
We'll do the relationship to the previous chapter.
Beneath the Autumn Leaves begins in the autumn of the year in which Genji is 18 and overlaps with the latter part of the Safflower, and somewhat less with the latter part of Young Murasaki. It continues to the autumn of the following year when Genji is 19.
It always gets me every time. I always forget he's still like 18. It doesn't make it better. It just explains some things.
True. All right. His Majesty's progress to the Suzaku Palace took place after the 10th of the 10th month. The excursion was to be exceptionally brilliant, and his ladies were disappointed that they would not see it. Since he did not want Fujitsubu to miss it, he arranged a full rehearsal in her presence.
Amazing.
Captain Genji danced Blue Sea Waves. His partner, the secretary captain, His Excellency of the Left Sun, certainly stood out in looks and skill, but beside Genji, he was only a common mountain tree next to a blossoming cherry.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, God. As the music swelled, and okay, so like since they're like dancing, my first thought, like when I read that, was like little kids play, and like the kid is a tree.
Yeah.
No speaking lines.
I just imagine that scene in Avatar: The Last Airbender where Zuko and Aang have to do the dragon dance.
Oh my gosh.
Except Genji's the most beautiful person in the world, so.
Oh. As the music swelled and the piece reached its climax in the clear light of the late afternoon sun, the cast of Genji's features and his dancing gave the familiar steps an unearthly quality. His singing of the verse could have been the Lord Buddha's Kalavinka voice in paradise. His Majesty was sufficiently transported with delight to wipe his eyes, and all the senior nobles and princes wept.
Yep. So good they cried.
When the verse was over, when Genji tossed his sleeves again to straighten them, and the music rose once more in response, his face glowed with a still greater beauty.
Yep.
Even in his moment of triumph, the heir apparent's mother remarked bitterly, "With those looks of his, the gods above must covet him. How unpleasant." The young gentlewomen listening thought her hateful.
The heir apparent's mom also this is the first time she's appeared since she like basically drove Genji's mother to die.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Fujitsubu knew that she would have liked his dance still better if he were not so importunate in his desires, and she felt as though she had dreamed this vision of him. She went straight to attend His Majesty for the night.
Reminder, Fujitsubo is like another one of his dad's concubines who he just really, really is very into. Genji is very into
her.
Because Because she looks like his mom.
That's right. Way back from the beginning. One of the very beginning weird things.
Yes.
Blue sea waves made the rehearsal today, did it not? He remarked. How did it strike you? It was very nice. She was too flustered to answer him better. His partner did not do at all badly either. In dancing and gesture, breeding will tell. One admires the renowned professional dancers, but they lack that easy grace.
Only aristocracy can give you.
The performance under the autumn trees may be an anticlimax now that the rehearsal day has gone so well, but I had them do their best so that you should see it all. Genji wrote to her the next morning. How did you find it? All the time I was more troubled than one could ever imagine. My unhappiness made of me hardly the man to stand up and dance. Did you divine what I meant when I waved those sleeves of mine? But I must say no more. She replied, for no doubt she could not banish that beauty and that dazzling grace from her mind. That man of Cathay who waved his sleeves long ago did so far away, but every measure you danced to my eyes seemed wonderful. Oh yes, very much.
Very much.
Overjoyed by the miracle of an answer from her, he smiled to see that with her knowledge even of dance, and with her way of then bringing in the realm across the sea, she already wrote like an empress. He spread the letter out and contemplated it as though it were holy writ. The entire court accompanied His Majesty on the progress itself, as did the heir apparent. The musicians' barges rowed around the lake as always, and there were all sorts of dances from Coma and Cathay. The music of the instruments and the beat of the drums set the heavens ringing. His Majesty had been disturbed enough by the magic of Genji's figure at sundown that other day to have scriptures read for him at temples here and there, and everyone who heard of it wholly sympathized, save the mother of the heir apparent, who thought the gesture absurdly overdone.
For the record, Coma is Korea and Cathay is China.
Okay,
So
thank you. I was like, what are those places?
yeah, it is down in the footnotes, but
Korea and China.
Yep.
His Majesty had pressed into the circle of musicians every office holder of recognized talent from among the privy gentlemen or the lesser ranks. 2 consultants, one the intendant of the left gate watch, the other that of the right, were put in charge of the music of left and right.
Really makes sense.
Every gentleman had chosen a first-rate teacher and practiced assiduously at home. Under the tall autumn trees, breath from a circle 40 strong roused from the instruments an indescribable music that mingled with the wind's roaring and sighing as it swept gale-like down the mountain, while through the flutter of bright falling leaves, blue sea waves shone forth with an awesome beauty. When most of the leaves were gone from Genji's headdress, leaving it shamed by the brilliance of his face, the intendant of the left gate watch picked chrysanthemums to replace them from among those before His Majesty. In the waning lights, the very sky seemed inclined to weep, shedding a hint of rain, while Genji in his glory, decked with chrysanthemums, now faded to the loveliest of shades, again displayed the marvels of his skill. His closing steps sent a shiver through the gathering, who could not imagine what they saw to be of this world. Among the undiscerning multitude sheltered beneath the trees, hidden among the rocks, or buried among fallen leaves on the mountainside, those with eyes to see shed tears.
Every time. So beautiful.
So beautiful. The greatest treat after blue sea waves was Autumn Wind, danced by the 4th prince, then still a boy. The
Shokyoden.
Shokyoden
Shokyoden's consort son. Yeah.
consort son, the 4th prince.
Because he's a prince, whereas Genji's a captain because it's a consort.
Oh, and Genji's mom was not.
Concubine. So there's like concubines and consorts.
Got
like
it.
the heir apparent's mother is a consort. That's why
So
he's
consort
the heir.
is basically like a wife.
Yeah,
like
consort
official.
is like official wife, and then like the head consort is the empress.
So is the heir apparent the empress?
I don't know if I think it's like something you have to be elevated to. And I
Oh,
don't think
it's
he's
not, like,
deigned
automatic.
to elevate anyone. So, but like the heir apparent's mother is like probably the first wife. So it would make sense if she was the empress.
Yeah.
Anyways, the fourth prince.
The fourth prince. Attention wandered now that the best of the dances was over, and what followed may even have spoiled things a little.
Oh dear.
That evening, Captain Genji assumed the third rank, upper grade, while the secretary captain rose to the fourth rank, lower grade. If every senior noble had reason to rejoice, each in the measure due him, it was because Genji's own ascent had drawn him upward. How gladly one would know what merit from lives past allowed him to dazzle all eyes and bring such joy to every heart. Her Highness had withdrawn from court, and Genji gave himself up as always to watching for a chance to see her, subjecting himself to further complaints from his excellencies. Nor was this all, for a gentlewoman there reported his abduction of the young plant, as his having taken a woman to live with him at Nijo, and her mistress was not at all pleased. He quite understood that she should feel as she did, since she knew nothing of the circumstances, but if only she had unburdened herself frankly to him like any ordinary woman, he might have explained things to her and calmed her fears, whereas in fact she was so intent on misinterpreting all he did that he could hardly be blamed for seeking refuge in dubious diversions.
How dare you?
In her person he found nothing lacking or amiss. She was the first woman he had known, and he trusted that even if she failed for the present to appreciate his high regard, she would change her mind in time. He displayed his exceptional quality in the unswerving steadfastness of this faith.
God bless. Keep pushing things, Genji.
The more Genji's young lady grew accustomed to him, the more she improved in manner and looks, and she snuggled up to him now as though it were the most natural thing in the world.
He's basically her dad at this moment.
He still kept her in the same distant wing because he did not wish his household staff to know yet who she was. And there he had...
Weird.
Yeah. And there, I thought you said where. I'm
Weird.
like,
where?
I don't know, in a place where the household staff was not going.
Yep.
And there he had her room done up beautifully, visited her day and night, and gave her all sorts of lessons. He wrote out calligraphy models for her and had her practice, he felt, just as though he had taken in a daughter from elsewhere. He assigned her a household of office and a staff of her own so as to have her properly looked after. No one but Koremitsu could make out what he was up to. His Highness, her father, still knew nothing. When she remembered the past, as she often did, her grandmother was usually the one she missed. Genji's company took her mind off her sorrows, but although he sometimes stayed with her at night, he was more often taken up with calls here and there and would leave at dark, and then she would arouse all his tenderness by making it quite clear how much she wished he would not go.
Yeah, she's alone in a strange place.
It so upset him to see her in low spirits after he had spent 2 or 3 days at the palace or his excellencies, that he felt as though he were responsible for a motherless child.
You are!
And hesitated to go out at all. He's so shocked by this.
Shook by paternity.
Shook. Reports of all this greatly pleased his reverence, despite the irregularity of the girl's situation. Whenever his reverence performed a memorial service for her grandmother, Genji provided the finest offerings.
Right.
Genji was anxious for news of Fujitsubo and called at her Sanjo residence, to which she had withdrawn. He was entertained by such gentlewomen as Omyobu, Shunagon, and Nakatsukasa.
Nakatsukasa.
It vexed him to be treated so obviously as a guest, but he swallowed his feelings and was chatting idly with them when His Highness of War arrived. His Highness received Genji when he learned that he was there. Elegant and romantically languorous, as His Highness was, Genji speculated privately about the pleasures of his company if he were a woman, and, having a double reason to feel close to him, engaged him in intense conversation.
He's the girl he stole's dad.
Okay, I was gonna say. His Highness, for his part, noted how much more open and easy Genji was than usual, liked his looks a great deal, and, being unaware that Genji was his son-in-law, indulged his roving fancy in the pleasure of imagining him, too, as a woman.
Now kiss. Now kiss.
Genji was envious when at dark His Highness went in to his sister through her blinds. Long ago, Genji's father had allowed him to talk with her in person rather than through go-betweens, and now he could only feel hurt that she kept him at such a distance.
You're an adult now.
I have been remiss in failing to call upon you more often, he said with stiff formality, but unfortunately I am inclined to be neglectful in the absence of any pressing errand. Should you need me for any reason, I shall be pleased to place myself at your service. He then left. Omyobo could devise nothing better for him, since plainly Her Highness was far less warmly disposed toward him than in the past, and her evident displeasure so shamed and distressed Omyobu that all Genji's subsequent entreaties to her went for naught. How soon it was over! Each lover cried silently, in an anguish that had no end.
I love it. So, again, this is like the Heian Eric Court version of the Days of Our Lives.
So much drama.
The drama!
Shonagon, on the other hand, was astonished to see so happy a pair before her, and for this she felt that she must thank the blessings of the Buddha to whom her late mistress had addressed so many prayers of concern for her granddaughter. The lady at His Excellency's was no doubt very grand indeed, and the many others whom Genji favored might easily cause trouble when the child was grown. But his special consideration for her charge was deeply reassuring. On the last day of the month, Genji had his young lady doff her mourning. Now, he said, for your mother's mother 3 months will do. But she had grown up without any other parent, and after that she wore not bright, showy colors, but dress gowns of unfigured scarlet, purple, or golden yellow, and very smart she looked in them too. Genji came round in his way to the morning salutation. You are looking ever so grown up this morning, he said, with the most winning smile. Weird. She was already busy setting up her dolls, laying out her collection of accessories on a pair of 3-foot cabinets, and filling the room with an assemblage of little houses that Genji had made her. Inuki broke this chasing out devils, and I am mending it, she announced solemnly.
I do like her. She's a weird child, a deeply weird child.
How old is she?
Probably like 9 or 10.
Okay, I was gonna say like.
So she's like 8 years younger than Genji, which is like less weird when they're both adults.
Yes.
The problem is right now he's 18, she's like 10, and he's raising her as like. So
he is the father figure.
He is the father figure, and that's why it's weird. Like if they'd met when she was like 20 and he was 28, it would still be awkward, but it would be a little less weird in like this time period.
Yeah.
This is weird.
How careless of her. I shall have it repaired for you straight away. We are not supposed to say anything sad today, so you must not cry. As he left, his imposing presence amid his large retinue brought her and her gentlewomen out near the veranda to watch him go, after which she dressed up her Genji doll and had him set off for the palace.
I love that, though.
Do grow up a bit this year, at least. Shonagon wanted to chasten her for thinking only of her games. A girl over 10,
Okay, so she's 11.
Should not be playing with dolls. Now you have a husband, you must be sweet and gentle with him, like a proper wife. You do not even like having me do your hair.
Wow. Oh, okay. Surprise.
Surprise. So I have a husband, do I? The men all these women call their husbands are nothing to look at, but mine is a handsome young man.
She's into it. I mean, she's also
11. The idea was a revelation. Still, the addition of one more to the count of her years did seem to have made a difference. The household staff were taken aback whenever she turned out still to be a child, but they never imagined how innocently the two were sleeping together.
I mean, I would hope so. She's 11.
Genji, as usual, found the lady at His Excellency's dauntingly perfect when he withdrew from the palace, and her lack of warmth prompted him to remark, how happy I would be if this year you were at last to consent to engage with me a little. But now that she knew he had brought a woman to live with him, she was convinced that he had lofty plans for the newcomer and undoubtedly thought him a sorrier embarrassment than ever. With an effort, she feigned ignorance and responded to his joviality, after all, in her own distinctive way. 4 years older than he, she had a more composed dignity and a mature beauty that put his youth to shame.
She's 22.
How could she be wanting?
Mature beauty. Sorry.
Obviously, Genji reflected, it is my own dissolute behavior that has earned me her rejection.
Correct.
Her lofty pride at being the only daughter, not just of any minister, but of the greatest of them all, and of no less than a princess, moved her to condemn his every lapse, while he, on his side, kept wondering why he must defer to her so, and keep trying to bring her round. Such were the distances that kept them apart. His Excellency, meanwhile, deplored Genji's misconduct, but he still forgot his displeasure every time he saw his son-in-law, and did all he could to please him. Early the next morning, he looked in as Genji was preparing to leave, and when he found him dressed, he personally brought him a famous stone belt, went round behind him to straighten his robe, and all but held his shoes for him to step into. It was very touching.
What a great father-in-law. Oh.
I look forward to wearing this at the privy banquet and other such occasions, Genji said. Oh, I have better. I just thought this one a little unusual. He insisted that Genji put it on. In fact, looking after Genji in every way was his pleasure in life, and he asked only to welcome such a man and see him off no matter how rarely. Genji set out on his round of New Year's calls. Although it was not really long, His Majesty, the heir apparent, His Eminence, and then, of course, Fujitsubo at her Sanjo residence.
So for the record, Sanjo is like 3rd Avenue. Nijo, where Genji keeps his palace, is 2nd Avenue. And it's like based on like how far away you are from the palace itself.
That's right.
So he, as like the
right.
son of the emperor, gets to live a little closer, but they do live basically like 1 avenue apart.
Today again, he is a wonder to behold, Fujitsubo's gentlewomen observed to their mistress.
He's so pretty.
The more he matures, the more frighteningly beautiful he becomes. Just a glimpse of him through her curtains threw her feelings into turmoil.
Yeah, it would be, I mean, yeah, he's sincerely the hottest guy on planet Earth, basically. So hot, we're surprised the gods haven't come down to pluck him up and take him, basically.
It was worrying that the 12th month had passed without any sign of the anticipated event. Her Highness's women all looked forward to it this month.
Oh, Fujitsubo's pregnant.
What? Oh, that's
The anticipated event.
That's right.
Anyways, weird.
Her Highness. All right.
Oh, I missed that.
Right. Wait, the 12th month has passed? 12 months?
No, I'm assuming that means December.
Oh.
So she must be like very pregnant.
Got it. I was like, she's pregnant for 12
Oh,
months?
We're not elephants.
Oh, that's a lot. That can't really happen, right?
No, it can't. No. They mean the 12th month of the year. It's in December. She was probably due sometime in December, and now it's January, and she's still pregnant.
I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh, that would be a nightmare, to be fair.
Right? Exactly.
It's been 12 months, and I'm still pregnant.
Just cut it out.
Yeah, just get it out at that point.
Oh my god.
Something is wrong. If you were in the 12th month and you're still, something is wrong.
Anyway, way overdue.
Yeah, way overdue. They don't let you get that overdue.
Yeah. Her Highness's women all look forward to it this month, at least, and His Majesty pursued his preparations on the same assumption. However, the month went by uneventfully. The rumor went round that a spirit was to blame, and meanwhile her Highness despaired because she knew that this might ruin her forever. She also felt very unwell. Genji, who had less and less doubt what the matter was, had rites done in several temples, without saying why. Life being uncertain at best, he was tormented by the prospect that their love might end in tragedy, until a little past the 10th of the 2nd month, she gave birth to a boy, and for His Majesty, as well as for her own women anxiety, gave away to happiness. She personally dreaded the life that lay before her, but reports that the Kokidan consort was muttering imprecations against her reminded her that the news of her death might only provoke laughter, and this gave her the strength gradually to recover.
Live to make sure the
Spite.
Patty was live for spite. Fujitsubo, we love it. His Okiden consort is the heir apparent's mom.
His Majesty was impatient to see the child. Genji, who had his own private reasons for apprehension, called on the new mother at a moment when no other visitor claimed her. His Majesty is very keen to see him, he said, and I thought I might do so and report. But she understandably pleaded that it would be awkward just now and would not allow it. Actually, the boy was astonishingly, frighteningly like Genji himself.
It's another hot boy.
The resemblance was impossible to miss.
They have the same dad.
Yeah.
But you know she's
And she looks like the mom.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And she's like worried that people
Oh,
are going
will
to think
say
it's
that it's-
Genji's baby, not the Emperor's.
Yeah. Oh, fine.
Anyways, Her Highness.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Her Highness, conscience-stricken, wondered how anyone could fail after a single look at him to perceive and to censure a misdeed that she herself found repellent.
She thinks of Genji like a son. He
Totally
thinks of her as like, I could get this.
It
It's
looks like
his
your
mom
mom,
issues.
dude.
It's
Yeah.
his mom issues. Because you know who young Murasaki, the one that he's raising, looks like? Fujitsubo. Because she's her niece.
Everybody looks the same. It's just weird.
Mm-hmm.
What would they call her when the truth dawned on a world eager to spy out the slightest flaw? Pondering these things led her to despair. When Genji managed to talk to Omiobu, he filled her ears with passionate entreaties, but without any prospect of success. He pleaded so desperately to see the little boy that Omiobu protested. "Why must you insist against all reason, my lord? You will naturally do so in due course." But her own manner betrayed equal distress.
Even like the fact that he's pushing this so much that he wants to see the kid before the Emperor makes it seem like it's
You're making it weird,
his
dude.
kid. Yeah, like if anyone finds out about this, they're going to assume that you are doing this because it's your kid.
Right.
Yeah.
Does he not realize that?
He's 18.
I know.
And he's an idiot, so I don't think he realizes it. And they're very bad. Like, no one's gonna tell him this directly because that's not how, especially court culture works.
Yeah.
They're just gonna like be like, not today. No, it's not an auspicious day.
And he's like, why?
Yeah.
On so grave a matter, Genji could hardly speak plainly. Will I never be allowed to talk to her in person? He wept piteously.
You're an adult male.
What can be the tie that bound us two together a long time ago, that in this life she and I should be kept so far apart? I just do not understand. Knowing her mistress's suffering as she did, Omiobu could not dismiss him without a reply. Heartsick thoughts for her when beside him, and for you, sorrow not to be. Ah, this then is what they mean by the darkness of the heart. She whispered, "It is such a shame that either of you should ever be happy."
Omiobu wants them to get together.
Thus barred from communication, Genji went away again, but Her Highness, who feared the perils of gossip and warned against them, retreated from her once affectionate familiarity with Omiobu. She continued to treat her equably, so as not to arouse comment, but to Omiobu's sorrow and surprise, she must sometimes have betrayed her displeasure. In the 4th month, the young prince went to the palace. He had developed faster than most children, and by now could sit up on his own.
Wow. That is a fast developing baby.
That is, I mean, he was cooking for 12 months.
He is
That's-
awesome. And he's also like Genji 1 version 1.5. So I guess like it makes sense that he's like the head of the other kids.
He's like a prodigy.
He's a prodigy, another prodigy. Cooking for 12 months.
His Majesty completely missed the extraordinary, indeed unmistakable likeness between him and his father,
God.
and assumed instead that it was only natural for supremely beautiful people to resemble one another.
You know, that's the best possible thing that you could think. Wow, my two sons both look so beautiful, and it's just because all beautiful people look the same.
Totally.
That's the nicest way you can think of that. And it's probably for the best.
He was completely devoted to the child. He had felt the same way about Genji, but in the end, when it became clear that those around him would not tolerate such a move, he had refrained from appointing Genji heir apparent, and this had been an enduring disappointment, for it pained him to see all the beauty and distinction of the maturing Genji wasted on a commoner. His new son, on the other hand, had a mother of the highest rank and shone with a light equal to Genji's, and so he loved him as a flawless gem, which for her highness only made one more reason for continual sorrow and anguish. When Genji visited her highness's residence as usual to join in the music making, his majesty appeared with the child in his arms. "I have many children," he said, "but you are the only one I have seen day and night since you were this small. I expect it is the way he reminds me of those days that makes him look so very like you. Perhaps all babies are like that." He simply doted on his little son.
Sure, Dad. Sure.
Wait, but this is the Emperor's son? Or do we not know? Or do we find out?
I don't honestly remember.
Okay. Because now I'm like confused.
It could go either way.
Okay.
I think the assumption is that it's the Emperor's son, but up until fairly recently, Fujitsubo would let Genji see her, so it could be Genji's son. It might be Genji's son. Anyways, we'll continue. We'll look this up later. Genji felt himself go pale. Terror, humility, joy, and pity coursed through him until he nearly wept. So eerily adorable was the burbling, smiling child that there came to Genji, despite himself, the immodest thought that if this was what he looked like, he must indeed be a treasure. Her highness was perspiring in torment, and Genji's own pleasure in the boy turned to such anguish that he withdrew. At home again, he lay down, and after allowing the worst of his agitation to pass, he decided to go on to his excellencies. Gillyflowers stood out brightly there in the garden's green expanse. He had one picked and sent to Omyobu with what must have been a long letter, in which he said, "I see him in this, and yet even so at heart I am not consoled. On the lovely little pink there settles only heavier dew. I had so wished the flower to bloom, but everything in this world is hopeless." Because your stepmom won't see you. Yeah. It must have come at just the right time, because when Omyobu showed it to her mistress, urging her to give him back just a word or two, my lady, here on the petals, her highness herself was very deeply moved. In faint ink, as though her writing had given out in mid-line, very hot, that's a very attractive way to write, she simply wrote, "Oh, I know full well he only calls forth further dews that moisten my sleeves, yet I have no heart to scorn so lovely a little pink." Omyobu happily conveyed this to Genji, who was lying gazing disconsolately into space, convinced that, as always, his letter would go unanswered. Teenage boys. His heart pounded, and a rush of joy started tears from his eyes. When it gave him no relief to lie there in gloom, he went for comfort so as often to the west wing. He peeped in with a robe thrown casually over his shoulders, his side locks rumpled and wispy, and blowing a sweet air on his flute. There was his young lady, leaning on an armrest, as sweet and pretty as could be, and he felt moist with the same dew as that other flower, they looked like. Irresistible or not, she still had a mind to make him smart for not having come straight to see her when he got home, and so for once she was pouting. "Come here." He sat down near the veranda. She hummed, "When the tide is high," and put her sleeve bewitchingly to her mouth. "Dear me, when did you start quoting poems like that? It is not good for people to see each other all the time." She's becoming an adult, and she has opinions of her own now, and she's starting to judge him. He had a koto brought in for her to play. "The so no koto is awkward because the highest treble strings break so easily," he remarked, tuning the instrument down to the hyojo mode. The hyojo mode. She could not maintain her ill humor once he had tested the tuning with a few notes and pushed the instrument from him, and she played very nicely indeed. She was still quite small, and the way she had to lean over to put in a vibrato was extremely engaging. Entranced, he taught her more music by playing his flute. She was very quick and knew the most difficult pieces after a single hearing. He was satisfied that the liveliness of her intelligence met all his hopes. When he amused himself by giving a very nice performance of Hosoruguseri. Despite the piece's peculiar name, she accompanied him in a manner still youthful, but very pretty and true to the rhythm. The lamps were lit, and the two had started to look at pictures when Genji's men, who had been told he would be going out, began clearing their throats to remind him, and someone observed that it looked like rain. Then, as always, she became sad and dejected. She stopped looking at pictures and only lay face down, which to Genji was so enchanting that he stroked the rich cascade of her hair and said, "Do you miss me when I am gone?" She nodded. "I miss you too. I hate to spend a whole day without seeing you. As long as you are still a child, though, I must trust in your patience and try not to offend other people who are easily hurt. It is all very awkward, you see, and that is why, for the time being, I keep going off on these visits. Once you are grown, I will never go anywhere. The reason why I do not want them angry with me is that I hope to live a long and happy life with you. I'm having affairs for your benefit." His earnest, sure. His earnest reassurances only embarrassed her, and instead of answering, she just put her head in his lap and went to sleep. His heart melted, and he announced that he would not go out after all. The women rose and brought him his evening meal in place. "I am not going out anymore," he said after he roused her. She felt better then and sat up, and they ate together. "Then sleep here," she said, hardly touching her food, since she still suspected that he might go away. He did not see how he could ever leave such a companion, even on the last and most solemn journey of all, even in death. He ended up being detained this way time after time until word of it reached His Excellencies. "Who is she?" the gentlewomen asked each other. "How can he treat my lady this way? So far no one has suggested who she could be. No one at all nice or well brought up would keep the pleasure of his company all to herself this way. She must be someone he happened to meet at the palace, and now he's so keen on her, he is keeping her out of sight for fear of criticism. They say she is childish and immature." I mean, she's 11.
Because she is a
She's
child.
a child, but I guess no one knows because he keeps her hidden away. His Majesty, too, had heard there was such a woman. "It has pained me very much to learn that His Excellency is so displeased," he said to Genji, "and I entirely sympathize, because he is the one who did everything to turn the mere boy you once were into the man you are now, and I hardly think that you are too young to appreciate his kindness. Why then are you treating him so thoughtlessly?" Genji assumed an attitude of contrite deference and did not reply. "I suppose he still does not like her," His Majesty reflected commiseratingly. Still, as he remarked later, he shows no sign of tossing caution to the wind and losing his head over any gentlewoman of mine, or indeed over anyone else. What nooks and crannies can he have been poking about in to have earned himself this degree of resentment? I mean, he's not a very good husband, to be fair. Despite the passing years, His Majesty himself had not managed so far to give up his interest in the same sort of thing, and he had a particular taste for pretty and clever waiting women, hence the presence of so many on his staff. Genji's most casual approach to any of them was seldom rebuffed, but perhaps he found them simply too easy, because he seemed strangely uninterested, and even when now and then one did try her wiles on him, he would answer to her tactfully but never really misbehave, with the result that some thought him a perfect bore. Hot but boring. There was an aging dame of staff, a lady of impeccable birth, witty, distinguished, and well respected by all, who nevertheless was intensely coquettish, and Genji was curious to know why, when a woman might of course be light in her ways, she should be so thoroughly dissolute even in her declining years. On jokingly testing the waters, he was shocked to find that she did not think his proposition at all incongruous, but the adventure still amused him enough to pursue it, although to her great chagrin he kept his distance for fear of starting gossip about his liaison with an old woman. Once, when she had finished combing His Majesty's hair, he called for a maid of the wardrobe and went out, leaving her and Genji alone in the room. Like, his dad's like setting him up to like have liaisons. She was more prettily got up than usual, with a graceful bearing and lovely hair, and her costume was assertively brilliant, all of which to Genji's distaste betrayed her refusal to show her age, but he could not resist tugging at the end of her train to see how she would respond. From behind a heavily decorated fan, she shot back a languid glance from dark-rimmed, sunken eyes set amid nests of wrinkles. No one her age should carry that fan, he thought. Offering his in exchange, he took the fan and examined it. On paper red enough to set his face aglow, he saw painted in gold a picture of tall trees. On one side, in a style now passé but not undistinguished, were casually written the words, "Old is the grass beneath the trees." This is all very well, but what a horrid idea. What we have here, I see, is the wooden summer, he remarked with a smile. He felt strange enough just talking to her for fear of being seen, but no such worry crossed her mind. Whenever you come, I shall cut for you Whenever you come, I shall cut for your fine steed a feast of fresh grass, be it only lower leaves. Now the best season is past, she said with shameless archness. He answered, "If I made my way through the brush, I might have seen, for it seems to me many steeds must like it there, underneath the forest trees. It's a bit risky." He rose to go. She caught his sleeve and cried out through dramatic tears, "Never in my life have I been made to feel so wretched. Oh, the shame of it after all these years. I shall be in touch later." There are other things, you see. He broke free and continued on, but she clung to him, angrily bewailing the treachery of time. Meanwhile, His Majesty had finished changing and was now watching this scene through the doorway. What an odd pair, he thought, greatly amused, and he remarked with a chuckle, "I hear constant complaints about your lack of interest in women, but you did not let this one escape you, did you?" She made no real effort to defend herself, despite a degree of embarrassment, perhaps because she was one of those who are glad enough to have a liaison known as long as the lover is worth it. So yeah, Genji is really into girls, but he keeps it real quiet. Real quiet. So no one else knows.
He's such a ladies' man.
Right, that he's such a ladies' man. Except for maybe his first wife, Aoi, who is His Excellency's daughter, which might explain why she's like, this man, he's not worth it. He's not treating me good. No. Well, the secretary captain said to himself when he heard how all were agog over this incident, I pride myself on leaving no cranny unexplored, but I certainly had never thought of her. He then struck up an affair, wishing to taste her undying brandiness himself. Secretary Captain is such a weird friend, because he knows, and he constantly is like, oh, Genji went after her? I'm gonna go after her too.
Why, dude?
What? Yeah, why? I don't know. He's also Genji's first wife's brother, so it makes it even more awkward. He was a promising catch who might, she thought, make up for Genji's unkindness, but apparently it was only Genji she wanted, an extravagant choice. The secretary captain kept his doings so quiet that Genji never found out about them. The dame of staff would start straight in on her grievance whenever she came across Genji, and her age so aroused his pity that he wished to console her, but the idea was too depressing in practice, and for a long time he did nothing. Then once, when he was roaming around the Umeiden under cover of dark, after a cooling shower of rain, there she was, playing her biwa very nicely. No one was better at it than she, for she joined the men in concerts before His Majesty, and her wounded feelings now made her music especially poignant. Shall I cast my lot with the melon grower, she was singing in a voice of great quality. Genji was not entirely pleased. He wondered as he listened whether his feelings might resemble that others long ago at Gakushu. Then she stopped, apparently in the grip of emotion. He approached her, softly singing The Eastern Cottage, and in song she supplied him the line, Open the door and come in. He thought her a most extraordinary woman. Next came, with a sigh, Nobody is there, surely standing all wet through. Ah, how cruelly my humble Eastern cottage suffers in the soaking rain. He objected to taking all the blame for her troubles, and wondered what he had done to deserve this. Someone else's wife is more trouble than she's worth. What's with this and that, in her poor Eastern cottage, I give up making her mine. He meant to pass on by, but it felt so unkind to do so that he changed his mind and humored her by engaging in a bantering exchange from which he did derive a certain enjoyment. Considering that Genji seemed to be calling secretly on all sorts of women despite his innocent airs, the secretary captain resented his show of sober seriousness and his constant sermons, and he was forever plotting to catch him in the act. Now he was delighted to have found his chance. He's just following him. He's just following him. He bided his time in the hope of frightening and upsetting Genji just enough to teach him a lesson.
So he's a stalker.
A little bit. A chilly wind was blowing rather late one night when the secretary captain gathered that the two must have dropped off to sleep, and he stole into the room. Genji heard him, since he had not meant to sleep soundly, but he did not recognize him, and he assumed that the intruder was a certain director of upkeep who apparently had never been able to forget her. Well, I do not like this at all. I am leaving, he declared, humiliated to have been found by a man of mature years in so incongruously compromising a situation. You undoubtedly knew quite well that this gentleman was coming, and I will not put up with being made out to be a fool. With this, he gathered up his dress cloak and retired behind a screen. Smothering his mirth, the secretary captain strode up to the screen that Genji had just opened, and with a great clatter folded it up again, producing a spectacularly menacing din. Meanwhile, the lady, who played the proud beauty despite her age, and who knew something of crises like this one, having been through several before, was not too panic-stricken to restrain the intruder firmly, trembling with apprehension over what he might do to Genji. Genji would gladly have escaped unrecognized, but a vision of himself from the rear in full flight, clothes flapping around him and headdress askew, gave him pause, for he saw how silly he would look. The main reason to not run. To keep Genji from recognizing him, the captain next put on a dumb show of maddened rage and drew his sword, at which the lady cried out, "Oh no, my darling, no!" and wrung her hands entreatingly before him. It was all he could do not to burst out laughing. Her veneer of comely youthfulness was all very well, but the spectacle of a distraught woman of 57 or 8 caught in the throes of terror between two superb youths of 20 was absolutely absurd.
Sir.
The secretary captain's ostentatious disguise and the very fierceness of his pantomime now betrayed him to Genji, who felt an utter idiot when he understood the entire performance had been for his own benefit. Highly amused now that he knew his opponent, he seized the captain's sword arm and gave it a hard pinch. The captain got angry, but he nevertheless broke down and laughed. "Seriously though," Genji said, "are you sure you are in your right mind? What a joke to play on me. Anyway, I shall put on my cloak." But the secretary captain got a grip on it and refused to let go. "All right, you too then." Genji undid the captain's sash to strip the cloak off him. They wrestled back and forth while the captain struggled to keep him from succeeding, until his seam gave way and Genji's cloak came apart. Now kiss. "The misdeeds you hide may well soon be known to all. Now our tug of war has torn a rent in the cloak that covered so many sins," the captain said. "Wear it now and everyone will know." "Such a summer cloak may hardly hide anything that I know full well, but what a poor friend you are to uncover me that way," Genji retorted, and the two of them went off together, their garments trailing about them, the best of friends.
Okay.
What a weird friendship.
Oh.
Genji's weird.
I was like, all his relationships are weird.
All of them are weird. Genji lay down to nurse his vexation at having been found out. As for the outraged dame of staff, the following morning she sent back a pair of trousers and a sash they had left behind, with the message, "No complaint of mine could relieve my misery, now the double wave that dashed itself on my shore has again slipped out to sea. The river is dry." She has no shame. Genji's thought was unkind, but he was still sorry to have upset her, and he therefore answered simply, "Never mind that wave and its boisterous assault. That I can let pass, but I would lodge a complaint against the welcoming shore." The sash was the secretary captain's. He observed that it was darker than his own dress cloak, and he noted also that his cloak was missing the outer band of one sleeve. "What a ridiculous business," he said to himself. He was beginning to feel better. "I suppose you are bound to play the fool when you let yourself in for this sort of thing." From his room at the palace, the secretary captain now sent Genji the missing piece of sleeve wrapped in paper, with the advice to have it sewn back on. How did he manage to make off with that? Genji grumbled to himself. If I had not got his sash. He wrapped the sash in matching paper and sent it to him with the verse, in fear of your blame, lest the sash should tear in two, and so you and she, I have not once looked upon the bright color of its blue. Now that none but you has made off as you have done with that sash of mine, I shall not spare you my blame for having torn us two apart. My wrath will strike you in the end," the captain retorted. Both set off when the sun was high to wait upon his majesty. Genji cultivated a bland innocence that greatly amused his friend, but the day was crowded with memorials and decrees, and the sight of each other behaving with such punctilious gravity allowed them no more than an exchange of grins. The secretary captain came up to Genji during a lull in the proceedings and said with a detestable leer, "I trust you have now learned not to keep secrets." "Why should I have? The fellow I pity is the one who got nothing for all his long wait. Seriously though, rumor is rife. The two of them swore each other to silence. Thereafter, the secretary captain brought up the incident whenever he had a chance, thus impressing Genji ever more vividly with what he owed to that tiresome woman, the secretary captain's sister.
His wife?
Yeah, his wife. Meanwhile, or the woman that he was caught with.
Oh.
Meanwhile, Genji stayed out of her way, lest she subject him again to her tragic complaint that he had done her a grievous wrong. The secretary captain kept all this from his sister, but he reserved the idea of telling her as a threat to hold over Genji when the occasion might warrant it. Even Genji's half-brothers, born to the greatest of their father's ladies, held Genji in awe and deferred to him as his majesty's favorite, but not so the secretary captain, who rose bravely to Genji's every challenge and clearly remained determined never to be outdone. Only the secretary captain was his sister's full brother. Yes, Genji was an emperor's son, but he himself was the preferred son of his majesty's foremost minister and of a princess, and for that reason he did not feel at all Genji's inferior. His person combined all desirable qualities, and there was no attribute of excellence that he lacked. The rivalry between these two took some peculiar turns, yes, though it would be a bore to describe them all. It appears that in the 7th month, Fujitsubo was elevated to empress. There's your answer. Genji became a
She has
consul.
a beautiful child.
Beautiful child. And he wasn't allowed to make Genji's mom an empress. Because Fujitsubo was consort, not a concubine. And Genji became a consultant. Like every man in his 20s. He's becoming a finance consultant. I know it's different, but still. Soon His Majesty would act on his desire to step down from the throne, and he had a little prince in mind for the next heir apparent. However, there was no one suitably placed to look after him when that time came. The prince's maternal relatives were all imperial, hence excluded from governing, and His Majesty had therefore wished at least to make his mother's standing unassailable in order to strengthen his position. All this compounded the coquetting consort's agitation, as well it might, but His Majesty assured her, the heir apparent's reign is coming soon, and you will then be the Empress Mother. You need not worry. People had indeed been complaining, as one would expect, that His Majesty could not just set aside the lady who was the heir apparent's mother, and who had been his consort for 20 years, in order to appoint someone else Empress over her. Genji, the new consultant, was in Her Majesty's escort on the night when she entered the palace in state. She, whose own mother had been Empress, glowed with the beauty of a jewel, even among the exalted company of past Empresses, and she enjoyed such unexampled esteem from His Majesty that everyone else too held her in the highest regard. No wonder then if the despairing Genji thought of her and her palanquin, and knew that she had now well and truly passed beyond his reach. It was almost too much for him. There can be no end to a darkness in my heart that blots out all things, now that I must watch her go off to live among the clouds, he murmured to himself. For him, it was a tragedy. The more the little prince grew, the less one could tell him apart from Genji, but although this tormented Her Majesty, no one else seemed to have noticed. In truth, one wonders how anyone could be born as handsome as Genji, and yet at the same time look unlike him. They were to all as the light of sun and moon coursing through the sky. And that is the end of that chapter. And once again, I'm Anne.
I'm Christina.
And join us next Monday for more Tale of Genji. Actually, I think next Monday is story time. And then Tale of Genji. But yeah, follow us, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And see you guys next week. Bye!